Welcome again to Life in the God Lane. I'm Tom West, and this is my power verses. There's two of them for the day for March the 6th, 2022. Call this message Everlasting Loving Kindness. It's from Psalm 103, verses 17 and 18. I hope you'll subscribe to my channel. Hit the bell so you get notified every time I put one of these things out, which is once a day. And give me thumbs up, make comments. Pass this on to someone else so they can be blessed by it. And hope you'll do all those things. Help me get this out to as many people as we can. All I'm doing is teaching the Bible, and I want to just bring God's word to as many people as I can. I was raised in Flagstaff, Arizona, and there's a river that runs through town. It's called Rio de Flag, the River of Flag, And it's usually dry unless it's raining or unless snow is melting. It is inconsistent in providing water flow, to say the least. If you drive down the road towards Sedona, Arizona, you'll pass Oak Creek. Spent a lot of time there as a teenager, causing trouble for myself and everybody else. But Oak Creek always has water flowing. It could run high sometimes and lower sometimes, depends on whether the snow's melting on the mountain. But the flow of Oak Creek is everlasting. It doesn't stop. The loving kindness of the Lord is like Oak Creek. It is not like Rio de Flag. It's always running. Look at Psalm 103, verse 17 and 18. But the loving kindness of the Lord is from everlasting to everlasting on those who fear him, and his righteousness to children's children, to those who keep his covenant and who remember his precepts to do them. Notice that God's loving kindness to us, that is his kindness driven by love to people other than himself. That's what loving kindness means. Notice that it is from everlasting to everlasting. God's loving kindness to us is everlasting multiplied by everlasting. Think about that. It lasts forever. It never runs out. It's like Oak Creek, not Rio de Flag. It keeps on going. Along with God's loving kindness, he passes on his righteousness to children's children. That is, to grandchildren. He passes on his righteousness to our grandchildren. Well, how's that work? The loving kindness goes to those who fear or those who revere the Lord. They are the same people who keep his covenant and remember his precepts. That's the nature of people of faith, which is what we are. Remember again, Psalm 103 looks forward 1,000 years from when David wrote it to Jesus' payment on the cross for our sin and his resurrection from the dead to thump death forever and for good. Those people who fear or revere the Lord are those who enter into a new covenant, an agreement between God and man based on Jesus' payment for sin and his defeat of death in the resurrection. They enter into a covenant relationship with God. They come to Jesus in faith. They receive the new birth, keeping the new covenant. Then they receive God's loving kindness by him forgiving all of their sin, past, present, and future, permanently. Think about that. All gone. And when a person enters this covenant of new birth by faith, they receive God's righteousness. The righteousness is the personal property of Jesus because he's the only guy who ever lived without sinning. And when you come to him in faith, he transfers it to the believer's account. When we come into that new birth relationship with Christ, into that new covenant relationship with Christ, he transfers his righteousness to our account. And remember that the righteousness goes to the children's children, that is the grandchildren. So how does that work? And by the way, his righteousness stands for us forever. Never goes away, stands for us forever. Even when we goof up again, he has granted us righteousness based on the fact that he paid for our sin, forgave it all, and transferred his righteousness to our account. It goes to my grandkids. My grandparents, this is how this works. My grandparents were Christ followers, and they passed the faith on to my parents. And they passed it on to me and my siblings, and my grandparents did too. I knew my grandparents well, and they were impactful on my life. In fact, my grandpa had me a disciple by the time he died when I was 12. Typically, I goofed up some after that, but it came back because of him. Typically, grandparents pass the faith to the next generation. And so God's loving kindness and righteousness is a river, like Oak Creek, that just keeps on flowing from everlasting to everlasting between generations. We wanted to do that. So live in and pass on the river of God's loving kindness and righteousness. It is the ultimate benefit of the Lord. Bless your heart, and I will see you tomorrow.